Angela Cockerham, Chair, Judiciary A. She is in the house. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good
to see you.
morning, Paul Gallo. Doing well.
Thank
How
you.
are you?
Thank you. Good. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it very, very much. Man, I'm looking over your list here, and you have had a lot. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16, 17 bills that have cleared, and I think only one that died.
Yes, I have. You're talking about for 2023, right?
Yes, I think this better be
Yes.
2023. Yeah.
Yes, so there are a lot of bills on the calendar from Judiciary A. There was just a lot that we had to consider. There were a lot of good bills in Judiciary A committee this year. A lot of them, unfortunately, we weren't able to bring out. They'll have to wait until the next legislative term. But there, as you can see, and I always say this, Paul, we gavel in on the first day, and then the session just kind of takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And so that's what you see, actually, what's going on now.
Has been any surprises so far this year that you weren't expecting?
No, but it will. I mean, it's still early on in the session.
Yeah.
And I usually come in, just to be honest, I usually come in without any expectations. Just go in and let's get it on. Let's rock and roll with the session and pray that we do some good for the state of Mississippi.
I do want to talk about, because we're going to talk about that coming up in a moment or two, as far it was Dr. Catherine Panel and also Chris Bell, one of your cohorts in the House. There was one bill, I think, that did die. I guess there were multiple bills on the fentanyl testing strips. Do you know that were there more than one bill pertaining to that on the testing strips for fentanyl?
I think there were, and I know that Dr. Panel has been talking about these fentanyl testing strips for quite a long time on your show and in other mediums. So I think that there were more than one bill. Yes.
Okay. Your thoughts on those?
I think that she makes a pretty good argument. I will say that the chairman of that drug policy committee, Lee Yancey, has done an outstanding job. You used to years past, and you can attest to this, Paul, when we had drug policy, there were just a few bills that were coming out. But now, especially after we saw what happened last year with our marijuana bill, the drug policy committee is becoming more and more important here in the state of Mississippi. So I think it's headed in the right direction.
And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Perez and I we were talking about this earlier. You had another big drug bust. It gets bigger and bigger. You had another big bust, 170 pounds. I think we had like 240 pounds of marijuana confiscated a little bit earlier in the week. Some big drug bust on that. Is that tied in any way, shape, or form? Maybe Sean Tyndall can answer that, and Sean's going to be on with Gerard coming up a little bit later on this morning. Is that tied to us finally opening our stores in the state, and people think that the flooding the market with marijuana on the black market would be more conducive to and less possibility of getting caught because now we're selling it at stores? I don't know what their thought process is, but it's just kind of coincidence or ironic that you have these big busts now in the state of Mississippi.
Well, I think that you have had big busts previous to this. I will say this. We put it on a ballot for an initiative. It passed overwhelmingly, and we involved the Department of Health, and quite a lot of thought went into that bill. You do have, unfortunately, some individuals who have medical conditions, and the studies have shown that it helps. And so I would imagine as the years go on, we'll have to amend this bill as we see fit. But when you have a ballot initiative and the people of the state of Mississippi vote overwhelmingly for it, I think it was something that the legislature needed to pay attention to.
That ballot initiative, of course, also cleared. There's some people not happy about it. They want the legislature out of that with any checks and balances, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, we were supposed to, and again, last year, Paul, we had so much on the plate last year for last year's legislative session, but I'm hoping we can pass the ballot initiative. I think that you do have to have some mechanism, some way for people, especially residents here, if it's an issue that they really, really care about, where they can get it on the ballot and let the people vote on it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's opposed to that, but I don't think it should be easy. It should be a tough process to bypass the legislature on something like that.
Well, I agree because that's why you elect your representative and your senator,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But
And it almost has to the point where you guys have just failed and we have to do something. I mean, it gets to that point.
when it gets to that point, yes, but I do think that you do have to have some kind of mechanism. I'm not saying that it should be a cakewalk. It should be very easy, but I do think if you go out and you get your signatures, et cetera, then if you've done the work, once we go in and define what that initiative is, then put it on the ballot.
But looking back here, if the Supreme Court of the state of Mississippi had not ruled like they ruled, you guys could not have made any course corrections at all under then another initiative process.
This is true. This is true. But being that the Supreme Court did rule the way that they ruled last year, then the legislature will have to act at some point.
I do want to ask you this as far as some of the bills here that's coming out of Judd A. Are there any, Angela, that will affect or change or enhance the court system in our state at all because of where we are now?
Oh, that's a great question. So we have quite a few. So we've got the Rivers-McGraw bill that deals with drug courts, our courts of intervention, that deals with mental health courts. And I would like to expound on that mental health court a little bit later on. We are adding more money. We have a bill that AOC is requesting to add more money for our judges to be able to go in and hire staff, to hire attorneys. And I think that's very important because if you have a judge and he or she has good talent, a good team, and it's helping them in the administration of their particular court, then that's very essential. And then we're also adding new ADAs in certain districts and also adding investigators. And so this is a year, what you see coming out of Judd A. Paul is a correlation where we have quite a few bills that are affecting our judicial system statewide.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously, post-Dobbs, we have quite a few bills that are dealing with child protection and adoption. So if you really look at the bills, Paul, that are coming out of Judd A., those are the two main targets for Judd A. this year.
Yeah. I don't think people understand this a lot because it's easy to say what the mayor is doing, not doing, any mayor, what any police chief's not doing, why you need more police on the beats, all of those things. But I don't think they look at the court system, the DAs, and all of that, and understand how important a part they play in either success or failure.
Oh, you're exactly right. It's essential. And when you have a jurisdiction anywhere in the state of Mississippi where there is an abundance or you have a high caseload, then quite naturally that district is going to need more help.
You feel pretty good about what these bills would do as far as, number one, expanding them, number two, putting a little bit more money into them as far as the personnel?
Oh, it's what's needed. It's what's needed, definitely.
And that can't start till July of this year?
It starts the beginning of the fiscal year.
Well, I want to go back to HB 1218, the Rivers-McGraw Act, when we come back.
That'll be great.
We will do that. Angela Cockerham, Mississippi House of Representatives. She is chairman or chair lady of Judd A. in the House Committee. Coming up 8:05, Dr. Panel and also Chris Bell. We'll talk to them about those fentanyl strips. Back with more coming up next. Back live in the Trustmark studios where you can choose a personal checking account from a multitude of options that fit your needs. That's Trustmark, people you trust, advice that works. Member FDIC, Chairwoman Angela Cockerham of Judd A. in the House, which has been busy. Thank you guys, and also the Senate, both gaveling at 10 o'clock this morning. Let's go back to, I think it was HB 1218, the Rivers-McGraw Mental Health Treatment Court Act, and what does it say and what does it do?
So what we're doing with that particular act, and we had a bill introduced last year, and I'm happy that we're making progress again with it this year. It's going to establish mental health courts, mental health treatment courts, and you know the significance of the drug courts in our state, but We also need a mental health component.
Yes.
And after last year's session, we were able to give money to AOC so that we could do some pilot mental health programs, mental health courts throughout the state. And I'm happy we're going to have some of those in Southwest Mississippi in addition to other parts of the state. So you'll see some in Amite, Wilkinson, Pike, and Adams, as well as on the coast and in Northeast Mississippi, in the Delta. And what we're trying to do is mirror what we have with our drug and veterans courts. You've probably heard Chief Justice Randolph Paul where he does this Money Matters presentation. And Chairman Wiggins and I, earlier in the session, we had a joint A committee from the House and the Senate where Chief Justice presented, and he talked about the significance of the mental health courts in the state of Mississippi and how that will help decrease the incarceration rates, but also it'll help an individual who needs this particular help or treatment. So I'm very happy about this bill. Last year's bill included Chantry and circuit courts. We made a few revisions this year because there were some questions about, well, does Chantry court really handle criminal matters? And, all of these were very relevant questions. So we went in and tweaked it a little bit, but I'm very happy that we've revived it and hopefully we can pass it.
For folks who don't remember this, Rivers McGraw was a young man, and I think this is affecting between 18 and 22, 23, 24, 25. If they've been arrested for a drug or alcohol, I think basically it gives them a little bit more leeway to help them out with that mental anguish. Or exactly what does the bill say?
Well, it helps give AOC the authority to go in and establish these courts, these mental health courts, and throughout the bill is probably about 19 pages or so, which is relatively short for one of our bills, but it just kind of sets out the path for AOC to establish these courts, who may be able to participate in these courts, and it's in actuality the enabling legislation for the courts.
Anything as far as parole, addressing the parole board or anything like that in Judd A?
No, there's not. That typically would go to Judd B because of the criminal nature of it, or either corrections. But no, we don't have any bills of that nature in Judd A.
I see the Department of Public Safety authorized changes, or rather charges for services with other state agencies. I'm just looking over some of the income tax increased tax credit for child adoption expenses. Anything else on this long list here that you might want to highlight before we get off of this? Sexual assault evidence kit. We talked about that before.
We have, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I did want to bring this bill up again. We reintroduced it. We went back. This is another bill that is so important because, as you know, you have these kits, the testing kits.
Yeah.
After an individual is raped, they need to be tested. And we added an extra component in this particular bill, Paul, so that we can at least study how we can have a tracking mechanism for these kits. And we worked with Joyful Heart this year, some members of the Senate, Senator Boyd, and others in the Senate, in addition to some of the House members like Representative Dana McClain. We spent a lot of time. Actually, we started probably in about maybe the summer working with Sandy Middleton and others. As you know, this is an issue that's very close, near and dear to Sandy's heart. And so we put a lot of time in this bill, and I think it's a good bill.
For just simplification for people who don't keep up with the process as much as a lot of people do, now these bills from the House go over to the Senate and vice versa?
Exactly. They'll go to the Senate. I call it a bill swap.
Right.
And then those that need to go to conference will go to conference. And then we also have the appropriation process, too. Right now, we're debating general bills on the floor. We'll do that until next Wednesday or Thursday. And then after that, you'll see appropriations and Ways and Means with the finance bills. So it's quite an intricate process that moves rather quickly.
Will you get those Senate bills that we talked about last week from the Lieutenant Governor and others that are a number of bills that would address crime, or will they wind up in Judd A? We're talking about Senate Bill 2101, 2099, 2100, 2122, 2127, and 2420. everything from increasing the statute of limitations for bribery of a public official to increasing minimum sentences for crime of stolen property, revising crime for motor vehicle theft, increasing minimum sentences for crimes of fleeing law enforcement and resisting arrest and carjacking. Will those wind up in your committee?
Some of those sound very criminal in nature, addressing criminal aspects of our justice system. So it kind of depends on the speaker and how he decides to refer those. I may or may not.
I got you. So he would decide where they go.
Yes, the speaker decides where they go.
But for the most part, you guys haven't seen anything that's been worked on in the Senate, and the Senate really hasn't paid any attention to the House.
No.
So they're just kind of starting over. You're not working together on these bills before they're authored.
Usually not. Sometimes they are. For instance, with the marijuana bill, you saw that a collaboration between the House and the Senate actually just kind of depends on the bill and the nature of the bill. So some of them, we may kind of talk colleague to colleague, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? But quite naturally with Judiciary A, working with Chairman Wiggins, we are talking about the bills. And so it's good to have a colleague across the hall that you can have dialogue with.
Anything else that you want to mention? Because there's so many things as far as crime is concerned. The capital city, that's a tug of war now between the Capitol complex and the autonomy of the mayor and the council people there. It's just politics. But the situation is that we have crime that just has got to be under control one way or the other, and you got a better chance of solving that if you work together than pulling apart.
Paul, you have a better chance if you're working together. I will say this, the CCID initially was created a few years ago, and I remember when we had that enabling legislation for infrastructure in Jackson, which was badly, badly needed in Jackson to have money for infrastructure, and then you had a committee that was included in that particular bill. And even when we voted on the CCID a few years ago, there was excitement about it, and then there was a little bit of questions about, well, how is this going to work? I would say that with respect to the infrastructure through the CCID, you have seen a lot of improvements. With respect to the crime, you are going to have to work together with, Capitol Police, the sheriff in Hinds County, with Jackson Chief of Police. And I think once you get all the stakeholders around the same table, hopefully a lot of this could be resolved and worked out.
I hope so, because if you take the population of most of the people in the state or in the confines of the city limits of Jackson, they want help. They need help. I mean, you've got gunshots going on at night as a regular thing now in some of these neighborhoods, and it's not going to get any better. So if I'm the mayor, I'm going to reach out to anybody I possibly can. But there's two areas, and I can understand where the mayor and the politicians within the confines of the city of Jackson feels like their power has been usurped a bit, because even on the water thing and now on the police in the Capital District. But if it's me, I'm saying, hey, I've got so many problems. If you take these out of my hands, I would be more than willing. But that's not the nature of politics.
Well, definitely the people of Jackson, the residents of Jackson need help. When you look at the water crisis that happened last year, and we mentioned again the crime, but if all the stakeholders are working together for the interest of the people, it will work out.
How's your small hometown doing?
We are doing really well. I love House District 96, Amit, Wilkinson, Pike, and Adams, and all of Southwest Mississippi. We're doing really well.
We have Angela Cockerham, and I thank you so very much for coming in. It has been a pleasure. You always do an outstanding job.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you.